What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Claims Podcast. I'm here with Bob Medved. He is in auto claims. I guess first and foremost, Bob, thank you for being with us and appreciate you sharing your knowledge and content with our audience.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, Matt. I appreciate the time. I'm no longer in claims, but I did spend a 36-year career with a major insurance company in the United States, and I have a lot of background and experience in that area.
Awesome. Would love to hear maybe a little bit more about how you kind of got into it. Was it a choice? Was it an opportunity? What drew you into that space?
Sure. With most people entering the insurance industry, especially the claims portion of insurance, you never really plan to end up there. I don't know too many people who have planned to be in auto claims or in insurance claims in general, but the way that it happened for me was that I started out as a auto collision technician years ago.
Right.
And so I did that for a few years, and I really loved, because I love working with my hands and things like that. And I come from a background of a lot of blue-collar type people. I was raised in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where there was a lot of blue-collar workers. So I always considered my career would be in a skilled trade, and that's just how I decided to go. And so anyway, I was working as a technician, and prior to that, I went to school for a couple of years to get an associate degree in that area, in that field. And so I went out and I worked in that field for a few years, and I got a call from the school that I graduated from, and they asked me if I would be interested in coming back to being an instructor. And I really kind of jumped on that because it sort of excited me that I could keep my hand in the technical part of it, but also help students to learn the trade as well. So I did that, and I was a fairly young man at the time, and I did that for a couple of years, but then after I started having a family, I realized that the pay that instructors make is very difficult to raise a family on. And so I was sort of not really looking for something else to do, but I was sort of thinking about it. And a good friend of mine that worked there came to me one day and he said, "Hey, I'm going to be leaving." And I said, "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Well, where are you going?" He goes, "Well, I got an offer from an insurance company to be in auto claims as an estimator, and that's where I'm going." And at the time, I was shocked. I just said, "Well, why would you go work for an insurance company?" And he simply said, "Well, they're going to pay me $5,000 more a year than we're making here." And so I said, "Well, give me an application."
Right.
At the time, that's what it was about, And I started out as an auto insurance estimator, and using my knowledge of automotive repair, it came very naturally to me, and that's how I got started in the industry.
Interesting. And for someone who's ignorant, such as myself, would you mind clarifying, as you would, I suppose, to a 5-year-old, how does life in the day of that job look? What do you do in that sphere?
In the collision repair business?
In the claim side of that, yeah.
Well, on the claim side as an estimator, I would go out and I would look at our customers' damaged vehicles, collision damaged vehicles, and I would go out to their homes or I'd go out to collision repair shops and write an appraisal as to what it would take to repair that vehicle, or if it was beyond repair, what the vehicle was worth as a total loss to reimburse the customer. And it involved a lot of drive time, a lot of miles, different territories, things like that. But it was an enjoyable job because I got to talk to people that were technical people that I enjoyed talking to, and the customers. It was very fulfilling to be able to help them in a time of need when they really weren't prepared to have an auto accident. Nobody really is prepared for that. So it was enjoyable helping them out of that situation and getting back on the road.
Right. That's interesting. And that was when you were part of State Farm?
Yes.
Interesting. So how is that going to be impacted, do you think, by anything going on today? Do you think maybe for auto claims in particular, it could actually be a case where people spending a lot more time inside could actually be a boon for their business as opposed to what you'd expect with most types of insurance claims around this environment?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, interesting. So is that something you think?
I totally agree.
Yeah.
I totally agree because right now they're still collecting premium, and nobody's really driving that much. I mean, the driving
Right.
is way down. The collision shops are down 50%. They're either laying people off or they're closing altogether. But insurance premiums are still being paid. And even though they have recently started to reimburse their customers some premium, they're still going to end up very well out of this on the auto side.
Right. Right. Does that feature as part of that kind of thinking around having that segment and many other segments as State Farm does in insurance? Does that feature into their thinking around risk management as a business? Did that ever come up as a thought, or is it just a happy coincidence that they have some divisions to offset ones that might be more impacted?
Well, I didn't really work in risk management for State Farm. I was mostly on claims, but I have to think that they are considering every aspect of this coronavirus to see how it's impacting their entire business. Now, recently, a lot of companies have expected insurers to pay up on business interruption claims that were specifically excluded, or they excluded, I should say, any kind of virus that would cause business interruption. So there's a big argument now around that in the industry, should they cover that or not? And it's, when it's specifically excluded in a policy, you just can't cover things like that because it's excluded.
Right.
And if the government forces insurers to cover something that's excluded from their policy, well, what's going to be next? So that would be a very tough road to go down if anyone decided to try litigation on that aspect.
Yeah, I mean, so we are in the claims management software space, and it's kind of interesting to see that that's coming up a fair amount. I know a lot of states are enacting legislation, I believe 8 so far, around the lens of these insurance companies have to pay these claims. I guess on the other side of that, they have an element of getting funding from the same states that are doing that to avoid the bankruptcy or any adverse effect of that to those businesses. But I believe the head of Chubb, even as a large insurance carrier, as an example, came out saying you couldn't have one without the other. If you're going to force these insurance companies to pay, you have to provide some sort of backing. Does that sit well with you? Do you think that makes sense, or do you think there's a better way to handle it?
Like anything else that comes up all of a sudden, there hasn't been anything factored into the underwriting on that particular type loss. And there hasn't been any premium collected for that particular type loss. So yeah, there would have to be some sort of funding to back that to allow insurers to pay claims, when their policies specifically exclude those types of claims.
Right. Yep, that makes perfect sense. Taking a little bit of a step to the side into something different here, curious in your specific niche that you have a lot of experience in, that is kind of auto claims and other aspects of that industry, given that you like to work with your hands. Within that world, what are kind of the key metrics or areas that you would focus on to know that you were doing a good job in your unit or not?
The key metrics in any claims, whether it's auto or homeowners or whatever type of claim, are the people that you're insuring. It's the customer service, it's the CSI. That is the key metric, is how do your customers view you as a company. The ultimate thing is that you want your company to be looked at as, I can probably buy cheaper insurance elsewhere, but because of the claim service that I received and I have received in the past and how they treated me, I will never go anyplace else. That is the real key metric, how your customers view you as a company that's going to help them during a very difficult time in their life. It's the personal aspect. It's not really customer service. It's the customer experience, the whole experience of the whole process, because customers, when they have claims, they are scared. I mean, they don't have claims very often, statistically. And when you're in the claims business, it's like working in an emergency room in a hospital. You see gunshot wounds, you see people who are deathly ill, you see all kinds of carnage coming through the doors every single day, to the point where you're numb to that. And if you let yourself in claims get numb to how people really feel about their loss, then you're going to lose them. If you treat them like it's no big deal, for example, well, it's a big deal to them. They basically expect their insurance company just to put that virtual arm around their shoulder and say, hey, it's going to be okay, and this is why it's going to be okay, and this is how we're going to take care of you. That is the key thing that you need to do in any claims business.
Right. It's funny you say that. I was talking with an adjuster at CNA, and her comment this morning was that it was very much around customer service and getting people through something they hadn't, to your point, statistically experienced a lot before. So curious, if you were to start your own firm, would that be, you think, kind of the central tenet to success in that business?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question.
So I'm saying, if you had to put one area of insurance, specifically in your case, if you were to start an auto claims.
Well, like I said, it would be the customer aspect of it, how you treat your customer. Now, treating a customer well in claims does not mean paying them more than what their policy covers,
Right.
Because a lot of people think you could pay a customer to make them happy. You could pay them what you don't owe them to make them happy. But I worked for a mutual company, which means that all policyholders' premium dollars were being spent on other policyholders' claims. So
right.
we had a fiduciary responsibility to those policyholders to pay what we owed and not more and not less,
Right.
So, but the biggest successes I've had in claims, whether I was a manager or whether I was an estimator, was the fact that if you could talk to a customer and explain to them that they don't have a certain coverage, for example, and make them understand in a professional manner, where at the end of that conversation, they may not like what you told them, but they understand what you told them. And it's not a heated argument. It's just a matter of fact, this is what you have. Now, the biggest problem I see in claims today is that people buy these policies, and some of them go through agents, some of them buy online, and they have a whole different idea of what their policy covers. Then when it comes time to have a claim, they find out that their policy doesn't necessarily cover these things. A good example is rental coverage, auto rental coverage, okay? A lot of people think if they have full coverage, they automatically have rental coverage. Then they find out when their car's wrecked that they do not have rental coverage. That's a separate coverage they have to buy separately, for example.
Right.
So customers need to really be explained to exactly what these coverages are. And I know customers don't want to sit there and read their policy. I understand that.
Right.
But they have to understand at the inception of that policy what the expectations are and how the expectations are set with the customer and what will be covered if you have a loss. And I don't think enough of that is being done. So if you're asking me what I would do in my own company, that's one thing I would make sure that the customers understand exactly what they have, what coverages they have, so there's no surprises when they do have a claim.
That's good intel. And changing tack slightly, as a tech company, we're pretty focused on how that can impact insurance, legal, and a few other spaces. So kind of curious, a similar type of question, if you could be given an unlimited budget to apply, maybe now or even when you were in that job, apply that money to a piece of tech that would have helped you do your job, or something maybe even that you would have improved that already existed at that time. Was there anything that kind of stood out to you as a helpful tool that you used in that role?
Well, I think more online presence, more ways to connect with the insurer, because today, more than any time in history, we have more generational people coming in through our doors, okay? So we have up to 5 different generations coming in to purchase insurance. So how do those generations want to be contacted? They don't all want to be contacted online. They don't all want to have a phone call. They don't all want to be text. There has to be multiple ways to reach their insurance company, because one of the biggest complaints I hear from policyholders is that it took me forever to get a hold of somebody. And then when I did get a hold of somebody, they didn't have the answer. I had to call back and I had to talk to somebody completely different. More face-to-face interaction online would be good. Any kind of technology that we could implement to allow different ways to connect would be something that I would definitely look into.
Connectivity, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think on that side of things, I've heard of companies, especially in medical billing or medical claims, where A, the transparency is a big issue there. B, that's not our space, to be clear, but it's just an example of your point, being able to get in touch, and how you get in touch is put at the forefront of a company that I recently heard of called Cedar, not related to us in any way, but they apparently focus as their whole mission on how patients want to communicate with their healthcare insurance company. If that's FaceTime, if that's text, call, email, you can set up those preferences, and that combined with some transparency in what you're covered for and why you're paying any surplus, or even why you're paying your premium, which kind of falls into the coverage category, that apparently has led their equivalent of a customer service score to just skyrocket. So I think you're not alone in that view, and someone took that and did it in healthcare and is doing it in healthcare, and apparently is doing quite well with it. So super helpful to know that that could apply to other industries or other aspects of insurance, not just healthcare insurance. Sounds like that could work either in auto or other areas of regular personal day-to-day basics of insurance that we have, from P&C to auto. So helpful to know. To switch it a little bit again, if you had to start from scratch in insurance or as a person who likes working with their hands, would you have done anything different starting from graduation day to today, career-wise?
Well, I've always done things a little differently than most people anyway. I'm pretty happy with how I handled my career. Mm-hmm. My advice to anybody coming into this type of an industry would be to, be true to yourself. I mean, because I see so many people in this industry taking advice from, say, upper management. You need to do this to get ahead, for example. And then they do that, mm-hmm. and they don't get ahead. Well, you need to do this too. Then you need to do that. They follow someone else's path. I think you should follow your own path and do things that make sense for you and your career and your life. Because
right.
Too many people try to be something that somebody else wants them to be, and I never did that. I kind of, because I wasn't raised in insurance, for example. So when I came in with my own sort of attitude, and I worked my way up with that same attitude. But what I will say is that what I did was I tried to listen to people that I respected in my company, people that I knew that were successful, but that I also respected, and watch them, listen to them. Hopefully they'll mentor you. Find the right mentors, because in today's business world, and it drives me crazy, I have to say, that they assign you a mentor. It's like, this is going to be your mentor. Oh, wait a minute.
Right.
They're not a mentor to me. I don't even know this person, because they want these upper management people to be mentoring these other, younger employees, when that employee
right.
would never choose them as a mentor.
Right.
So choose your own mentor, and it doesn't have to be a specific program the company has. Everyone has mentors throughout life in different phases of life. I don't want one assigned to me, so
right.
that would be
right.
my advice is to, do things your own way within limits, but always keep focused on where you eventually want to be, the big picture, and then work
right.
your way towards that.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I had a friend whose birthday came up recently, and we had to make a video message for him. And one of the questions was, what piece of advice would you give my friend? And so I chose the exact same answer of, follow your own path. It tends to correlate with A, personal fulfillment, and B, success, and that you're going to spend those extra minutes, hours, days doing the work because you enjoy doing the work. And then to the mentorship point, that was something I find in our day-to-day business all the time. We've been very lucky in some areas to have good fits for natural mentors, but it's definitely something that kind of comes organically, where you see someone
yes.
who's following their path as much as you're following yours, they're doing it well. If you get on with them, that seems to be a great candidate for a mentor, and it just tends to happen organically. I 100% agree. And actually, prior to being in tech, I was doing investment banking, and it was very much a case of not following that first piece of advice, but along the way, organically found a mentor who guided my career in tech so far. So it's been really rewarding to do that. And then I wish I'd got that advice earlier. So they kind of dovetail into each other really nicely. So yeah, I think that's a great piece of advice. And then a kind of inside the actor's studio type of question, what do you do with your spare time?
Well, I still work with my hands. I'm an avid woodworker. I do a lot of different types of woodworking, and my house, I built my house 20 years ago, and I've never stopped working on it. I do a lot of, I do a lot of custom trim work, trim
nice.
Carpentry, things like that. And I make furniture. I make furniture for my kids and for different people and just things like that. So yeah, I still love working with my hands. And honestly, that's when I'm the happiest, is when I'm in my shop and just working. Of course, I've been in the business world for a lot of years, and that's great, but I still have to have a release, and that's kind of what I do. And of course, I try to play golf. I've played golf for a lot of years, and I'm still not very good, but I really enjoy getting out. So those are the two things I think are my main distractions.
That makes a lot of sense. Are you familiar with Ron Swanson or Nick Offerman?
Nick Offerman, yes.
Yes, a fictional character, but a guy who loves to work with his hands. I've been seeing a lot of those references these days with folks being at home, but I've been helping around the house with things like that as well. There's definitely a level of satisfaction in crafting something and having it being tangible. As a software person, that's a little bit of I'd say a rare quantity compared to what we do, but definitely appreciate that.
Well, honestly, my first real love was art. I mean, I went to, when I was younger, I went to art school on the weekends, Carnegie Museum in Pittsburgh, and I really wanted to be an artist, but I realized that the only time I could really create good art is when I was in the mood to do it, and I knew I couldn't make a living when I was only in the mood, So, so what that translated to, believe it or not, was repairing vehicles from collision repair. Because you take something that's crumpled up and you repair it and looks like brand new. It's like a piece of art. You're actually creating art when you're doing something like that. So looking back on my life and my career, and I've talked to a lot of people in the collision repair industry, including my father-in-law, who had his own shop for 45 years. And he used to make sculptures out of used paint. He'd create a wire figure, of a lady or something, and he would just, whatever paint he had left over from painting a car, he would just drizzle it down that wire structure until it became this unbelievable piece of art. And that's why I was convinced that, people who work with their hands like that are very artistic in nature. And that's how I think I kind of got into the whole business of repairing cars, because it was a form of that art. Right.
I was going to ask the question, what's your claim superpower, which is a cheesy one, before asking for parting thoughts, but I think you've nailed it with that answer. It seems like it's a merger of a love when you're in the mood, to your point, and something that manages to put food on the table. So appreciate you sharing that. And then I guess last question, was there anything we didn't touch on that you wanted to touch on, or any parting thoughts or advice to a young claims adjuster or an insurance company right now? Really, the floor is yours.
Well, yeah, I mean, things are changing so drastically in the automotive world. Talk about technology. I mean, cars today are so technically advanced that a lot of the people fixing them aren't even educated enough to do them, to fix them the right way, because you have to be specialized in so many different things. So it's going to be very difficult to stay up to speed on what you need to know to write an estimate or to pay a claim that's fair to fix that car properly. So get as much education as you can, because today education is ongoing. You never stop with how the technology in these cars today are being put in and advancing every new model year that comes out. They really have to stay up to speed on what it takes to repair these cars safely for their customers. Because the insurance industry tends to be behind the eight ball a little bit on paying for things that the car manufacturers require in order to fix the car properly. So I would just say, learn everything you can about repairing the cars, because when I was in training, when I trained people in the insurance industry, it got to the point where we were teaching people not only how to look at vehicles, but how to assess the damage based on what that particular vehicle needed. And the company one day just decided that, why do our adjusters need to know how these cars are fixed? And my simple answer was, because they have to pay what it takes to fix them properly,
Right.
So a lot of insurance companies have gone away from that type of training. And even if you're a young adjuster and you're working in one of these companies, do the training on your own so you understand that what you're paying for is the right thing to do to that vehicle, because nobody should force you to not pay for something that needs to be done to put that family back in that car safely.
Right. That's a great point. And I think with YouTube and things like that out there today, even if it's not official education, there's definitely a lot of online resources and other ways to to become knowledgeable about that subject. So great advice, Bob. Thank you so much for coming on. Is there any way for folks to get in touch with you?
Yeah, just my email. It's just bobmedved@hotmail.com.
Awesome, Bob. Thank you so much. Really, really appreciate your insights.
And thanks for the time.
Take care. Thank you, Bob.
All right, Matt.